Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Opinionated SEO Opinions. I'm really excited about today's because we are going to talk about something that actually sparked quite a bit of conversation in Women in Tech SEO. Shout out to Arij. Also, if you do identify as a female and you're not a member yet, why not? It's amazing. But yes, it was a conversation that got sparked by a video that actually one of my guests had done previously, and then just really sparked this great debate. So I'm really fortunate that these ladies agreed to talk about it with all of us today. So I am joined by Anne Berlin and Emilia. And what we're talking about is really structured data and schema and what is the value around it. So super stoked. We'll get into the conversation a little bit, but would love to get a little bit about who each of you are. So Anne, can you kick us off?
Sure. My name's Anne Berlin, and I am currently a senior technical SEO at Lumar, formerly DeepCrawl, one of the enterprise crawling tools in our space. And I work on crawling and indexing and site hygiene for enterprise scale websites in fintech, e-com, publishing, and affiliate marketing. And my current specialty is log file analysis and DevOps consulting.
Very cool. Thank you. And Emmy, let's hear about you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for having me, first of all. On my side, I've been working as a senior SEO product engineer for MediaMarkt Saturn, which is one of the biggest e-commerce players in Europe. I recently moved to a more technical and project manager role, like a generative AI expert and project lead at the same company. So I'm kind of switching away from SEO, but happy to have the conversation today and contribute to it however I can.
Awesome. All right, well then let's just dive in. So this actually got started by so one of the ladies who is near and dear to my heart, Brenda Malone, who's also a member of Women in Tech SEO. She actually shared your video, Anne, that you had done about SEO in 24 by Majestic. So can you give us a little rundown on what was the video about so that then we can get into the actual debate?
Yeah. So I did a podcast along with many others in the industry, this annual SEO projection roundup, and we talked about many subjects, and the aspect of the value of structured data was just sort of a tip at the end, a little feature that David does that says, like, what's the one thing that you would tell SEOs to stop doing? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that my tip was going to be controversial, but it was at the end of the recording, and I didn't promote it. I sort of held it close to the vest. My tip was that I would stop doing structured data. And as we get into it, we'll talk about the context of that and why I've come to that conclusion. But Brenda was the one who listened to the entire podcast recording from top to bottom and pulled that tip out, and not only made me feel supported because she actually listened to it and said I had something to say, but validated that I was onto something with my idea, and that's how we got to where we are today.
Yep. Awesome. Yeah. And it was a great conversation. Really loved it. So I'm excited to talk about, and why do you think that is? And then also start, we'll just see how the conversation goes. Because also, I remember when schema was first introduced and the silver bullet that it was at the time. And there's really not as many silver bullets available to us at all anymore. One of my favorite jokes is that I can't make any positive SEO changes overnight. I can take a site real fast, right? We can do that. But to actually make it skyrocket, we don't really have the tool sets that we used to have back in the, spaghetti Western kind of days. So and would love if you expand on kind of the context of that. And then I'm sure both Emmy and I will probably have some thoughts to share as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So why do I think that I would advise enterprise scale clients at this time not to embark on new rollouts of structured data implementation? And there's some caveats there, absolutely. Well, it's because of the realities of what we see with how schema has been implemented. So often it is implemented in a very bare bones way, and it breaks and then goes unfixed for a long time because it's difficult to defend the revenue impact of most types of structured data. And then I've also seen it's very common to neglect the essential off-page aspects that have to complement structured data implementation. So I have some examples of each of these and some background. But the general idea is that it is not often implemented with the advanced properties that would add significant value beyond the existing metadata and header tags that are on the page, and that it conflicts with some other operational aspects. One example is around merchant listings and product schema and how it can contribute to free appearances in the shopping pack. But even when product schema is valid and supplemented by an accurate merchant center feed, the differentiators are delivery cost, delivery speed, and return policies, which SEOs don't have any impact over. So again, can be difficult. I'm reticent to defend spend on implementing or improving schema when I know it's not going to make the difference on the SERP itself. So I'll stop there because I really want to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I want to say big thanks to the crew for giving me the opportunity to elaborate today, and for Anna Berlin for her video, and also for Brenda Malone for starting and sparkling this conversation. To the audience, I do apologize for my English mistakes because it's not my native language, and I will also try to take notes during my presentation, and so here and there I will try to inform my reading through my notes that I have and take during the debate. I can definitely attest that this is absolute truth. And I mean, it's true that we have a lot more operational issues, and there's a lot of difficulties in implementing schema correctly, especially if you work for a big media giant or e-commerce giant like I work at the current moment. If you don't have not the technical background, but the technical know-how, how to implement the schema properly and well and in a clean way, then it's very likely that you're better off by focusing your efforts on something different. And I fundamentally agree with that. However, I want to take a step back first. Before we talk about schema markup and talk about structured data in general for SEO, I want to explain the schema behind the schema markup and also the structure behind structured data. So the way it started is basically back in the days, especially IT-wise, Sam Torres, I think you were a former front-end engineer, you know that too. We started with monolithic architectures, IT-wise. That means that everything was concentrated in one repository, the data was there, the database was there, the whole logic, presentation, and business layer was in one place, and so on. But then we kind of shifted due to many reasons that I won't elaborate on now to microservices architecture. That means that we suddenly started having apps that are having these dispersed data sources and dispersed systems where this data is misaligned. So that needed some sort of standardization, that needed some sort of an alignment, some sort of interoperability element component added to it. And this is where schema comes into place. And not just for that, I mean, schema overall and schema markup as an idea is a data quality and data management concept. I mean, you have all these systems and all these businesses evolving over time. So you need to kind of enable these changes to happen in a structured way that is easy to catch from technical and whatnot reasons that we elaborate during the presentation today, but also use this schema markup to capture metadata about the data. For example, like semantics, to kind of put the dots and connect all of these dots together and so back and so forth. But maybe I will conclude my first comment by introducing you very quickly on when I changed my opinion about schema. It was during my visits at CERN in 2019. At that time, courtesy of my partner, he worked as an engineer at CERN between Switzerland and France at that point in time. And he introduced me. I was writing my thesis on the topic of NLP, intersection of NLP, SEO, and Google Discover. And when he introduced me to the idea of Tim Berners-Lee and what kind of vision he had for the linked open data and open web, it was completely mind-blowing for me. And this is where I actually started shifting my viewpoints.
Amazing. And yeah, I will say, I think, and maybe that's kind of the heart of what I think we're getting at today, but open to being surprised and being totally wrong. What I think schema gave us that we didn't have, 10 years ago, was really that closed data set, the closed values that, I could basically, for clients, and I worked with a lot of local services early in my career, it was much easier to be like, use the schema, this business is a type of a house painter. And I could know beyond a shadow of a doubt now that Google and other search engines, but really we definitely only focused on Google about 10 years ago, really understood what that means as a business, as what they offer. So I think there was a lot of power there for sure, because like I say, it was a way that we could make sure that Google actually understood, because prior to that, it was all just text crawling. And I started SEO back before there was Hummingbird. So the number of y'all, I've spelled the word refrigerator so many times and most people don't know how to spell it. So the number of variations of pages dedicated to commercial refrigerators I've created in my life is way more than I would have ever wanted to own up to. But, that's what we did. It was the keyword stuffing game. It was how many pages can you have posted about this? And then of course, semantic came in and NLP, and that really changed the game for us radically. And I think for the better. But what I think, and kind of what's being brought up is where does this change? How is it changing? Is it going to change based on everything that's happening with things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Bard? Like, how is that shifting the need? Is that actually causing a shift for the need of structured data, and how that relates to entities and how Google and other search engines can understand, like, this is a company and these are the products they offer and here's the services and here's where they send them. Whoever wants to jump in on how do you think really the shift to generative AI is changing everything as far as Google's understanding and the need for structured data?
Emi, thank you for grounding us as you did in how schema evolved. And I hope we can return to that conversation because I think it's really relevant here. Specifically to the points you were making at the end around, let's remember fundamentally how the schema project emerged and its value in adding structured semantic clarity to documents that were primarily written for humans, right? But Sam, I think this is exactly what's precipitated my evolution of thought here, because I too was let's put every kind of schema on the page, and every time a new rich result was announced, that was, back at the top of my list, chasing the new types of SERPs, and that was a winning strategy for a while. I think that working into my day-to-day or my week-to-week as a tech SEO for brands, exploring the new SERP surfaces, the search surfaces as they evolve at a breakneck clip, whether it is originally having a Bing chat or going into ChatGPT or trying Gemini, that it has become a opportunity to find where there are gaps in search engines understanding the business the business's offerings and the products themselves, or in the case of publishers, the breadth of their topical expertise, right? So I think that there is still value in structured data, but I mean, you mentioned that there are other ways to achieve the same outcome, right? So if I'm
Mhm.
testing some high value queries in one of these new sort of generative search surfaces, and I find that there's inaccuracies, that is
Mhm.
a
Way
very useful.
detrimental, yeah.
It's absolutely, it's harmful to the brand, but it's also, it tells you exactly where you need to intervene, whether it's with site structure, whether it's with off-page optimization and
Mhm.
Wikipedia, to other directory listings, or whether it's with prioritizing, clarifying your site taxonomy, or improving the
Yes, absolutely.
product detail pages.
I
Go ahead.
completely agree with it. I mean, it's true. With the new generative AI era, it became even more challenging to position yourself as a business, as a brand, especially if you're a small to medium-sized business, because you don't have the same funds as everyone else, right? And there was this long, how to say. A well-established thinking in the community, in the SEO community, that everything that you need to do needs to scale, especially schema-wise. But now we need to focus, take a step back again, and kind of focus on stuff that don't scale, like content quality, like user experience metric, and so on. But at the same time, we need to consider some interesting developments. For example, you mentioned the establishment of schema in 2015. So at that point in time, that project happened only because big players like Google, Microsoft, and others, and Yandex, and players like that had a commercial interest into it, because they were wasting too many crawling and processing resources on understanding the web. So they needed kind of putting a structure to it. And if you open the paper that is published by Dan Brickley and the community at that point in time, you will see one quote, which is, big data makes command schema even more necessary. So we are having some data that can be found online, either in my article that I wrote afterwards, or through Googling, simple Googling online. How much does the data increase given currently and in the past few years? And we can see that most of the data was produced in the past 2 years, actually, like 90% of it. But when you add generative AI to the equation, when you have low effort to create content and scale for someone that doesn't even have to have specialized skill, just good prompting skills or English skills nowadays, you see that suddenly we are having not a exponential but factorial rise in the content online. So that's basically pollution of the web in a sense. So how do you differentiate in a web that is polluted, that needs to be fact checked and also very reliable? The hunger for reliable information from search engines like Google will never stop, and it's actually coming more to the forefront of what we need to do with schema rather than not.
So I want, first of all, Emmy, I want to be best friends with you because your brain is incredible. And the things that you're interested in are exactly what, they're the point of conversation of what's driven me to fall in love with tech SEO. So I'm just so privileged to be in the same room with you. Um, I'd love to hear how you think structured data can make a difference in helping search engines differentiate good quality content in the polluted web.
Yeah, that's a good point of view or starting question that you can ask right now. So basically, we can also think about multimodality. It doesn't have to be content like text-wise. We can also think about the new OpenAI Sora videos that popped out recently, and also the images. And actually, when you think about it, how do you differentiate what's human created? Even though something being human created doesn't, having that label per se doesn't necessarily mean that it's automatically something quality, but obviously more meaningful than something that is AI created nowadays. So how, without a consistent watermarking strategy implemented by multiple players, that can be scaled, because you need that scalability element here, you differentiate human-based work? And how do we attribute this work for people who create this on a human level, with a lot of thought, with a lot of thinking, and so back and so forth? And finally, maybe to conclude this argument, I think that in your video with David Bain, you mentioned that the merchant center on its own is kind of some sort of argument why Google doesn't need structured data anymore, because they're organizing their data in their setup through Google's Merchant Center. But why do we have structured data? We have like 11 or 12, including product group, the markup that was recently announcements and schema updates that were never present at that number before. Why do we have that? That's my counter question to you, maybe.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. So first I want to start with the details of what prompted me to bring up the evolutions in Merchant Center as a sign that structured data is becoming less relevant. So this had to do with the announcement of something called Merchant Center Next. So this is something that's targeted at small businesses that don't have as many resources to help them be as competitive in the shopping surfaces as businesses that do have the resources to invest in a Merchant Center feed. And the language of that announcement is what got me thinking. So it's the purpose of Merchant Center Next is so that you can automatically connect product information from your website. And this suggests to me a move towards demonstrating that Google and other engines like it have the capability to detect from your user-facing product pages the information that we used to have to put into data tables, right? It's not always going to be accurate, and it's going to certainly depend on the quality of the data on your page, but
Sure.
it suggests a movement towards
Certainly.
being able to automatically generate what we used to put into product schema at essentially the same level of quality, right?
Yes.
Junk in, junk out, good in, good out. My experience is that due to the necessity to scale these types of implementations, the product schema for medium and large size e-commerce businesses is being pulled from content that's already on the page. So the quality of the data in terms of being useful to add additional context as to what's being sold is not high. So I think that my sense is that I also concur that there is real value to thinking about the quality of the signals that you're sending in your data. Linking to external entities, claiming your author's credibility through signals that are generated off-site, etc. That is a valuable way to help search engines distinguish that your website is a quality publisher with user interests in mind. But when the
Absolutely.
rubber hits the road, what I'm seeing is that the opportunities that are available, I mean, your argument is a sound one. Why would schema be less relevant now if more and more types of schema are being rolled out? But so many people are reluctant to take advantage of the product variant schema option because it is so difficult to implement, and
Sure. I can
it
attest to this.
surfaces the poor quality of data that we have. I love this framework that you provided us, which is that we're working in a microservices architecture, and we're also relying on, at this point, Web 2.0 is 10 years old. So
Yes.
well, many of these companies have legacy
Why did you have to say that?
investments.
That was just kind of mean.
Year old.
The web is old, and there's a lot of investment that has gone into the templates and the data structures and the content, and the kind of overhaul in terms of the way we lay out the data, the way we serve the sites. That's it's
Mm-hmm.
very unpalatable to organizations, particularly who are looking to pull as much revenue as possible out of as little investment as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with this. And I would definitely, I mean, as a holistic business advisor and marketing advisor or SEO advisor, and you name it, I think there are a lot of good opportunities to improve in your business rather than schema. I mean, the positioning, the messaging, the customer service that can go with it. There are many opportunities that you can focus your efforts on. However, we cannot take the business as a single instance in time. So you need to expand the picture and see that this business exists in an ecosystem of web pages. There are millions and millions and billions of web pages on the internet, and it's not just about accessibility of this data. It's also about its findability in that sense and building the presentation layer, because what fascinates me about the schema the most actually is the fact that how come when you have the unified presentation layer for everyone, how people from different cultures and nations and technical setups can basically come to the same conclusions. When you see an AI snapshot in Google, or where you see a question answered on Google search, you basically have the same presentation layer like someone in Macedonia, someone in Germany, someone in the US, and so back and so forth. Like most of the cases for standardized queries, there are some nuances, but still. But how do you then solve the problem about building this presentation layer, especially in industries that are having fast-paced setup? For example, let's take couponing with limited offers, or like education websites, or let's take news, for example, where something critical is happening, or for example, when I'm watching Djokovic matches on tennis, what's the current result right now? So these are very time sensitive, and it's not just about the findability of this data, but also when you add the complexity of time constraint on top of it, then it becomes much more difficult to do this quality on a quality way and at scale. That's what I wanted to point out.
So I definitely agree. There's a lot of difficulties. I'm not sure I'm really on the same page as far as how structured data solves some of that. It is a tool set, to be sure. But I do think kind of one of my favorite things to say is that indexation, and yes, I say indexation. I know it's an economic term, but language evolves. That it's not right? So what we used to expect 5 years ago is creating a page and it would get indexed, and we cannot rely on that anymore. And I do think structured data, linking it to your entities, showing like the same as, those types of things. And Anne, I love that you pointed out earlier about how a lot of what is used to create structured data, and following the guidelines, is that it should all be information that's actually on the web page itself.
Exactly.
So that's where a lot of, I think, tech SEOs stop, right? Because we don't feel like we can add more, because we don't want to get in trouble for cloaking or not having content posted on the page, right? Not knowing there's a difference between adding more context versus cloaking. Because also, I mean, it's to have the idea of like Google's a machine and we don't know what it's going to think or how it's going to figure it out, that I'm not actually trying to like dupe anybody here. I'm actually trying to add more. So I think that's part of it. It's like I say, if you look at the search guidelines, it actually says with structured data that anything contained in them should also be present on the page for a user to be able to see or understand, right? But also, one of the things that I still do see a little bit more powerful than other types from the past is kind of like that same as, when you're talking about organization. Like, how many times does it happen where you're trying to rank for your own brand name and the Facebook page is outranking you, right? Things like that. So I do think that these continue to be tool sets, but I would also say it's not, in my experience, what I've normally seen for solving the problems that you're talking about it's almost been exclusively like, we need to think about our IA, our information architecture, or our internal linking and how we're sending those signals. Or there's other things going on as far as the crawlability. Like, one of my specialties is JavaScript SEO. So I spend a ton of time looking at what signals are we showing to Google that this juice is worth the squeeze, that this page is worth going through the rendering queue. Do you and I'm open to being wrong, and I would love, like, I want to learn. So where do you see, like, from this, where are the missed opportunities, or what's the value that most people are missing from structured data to solve those kinds of problems?
If I can
Please,
add
Sam.
one additional layer there, because I want to hear you articulate this. I was having an interaction with an e-commerce website relatively recently. To your point, Sam, about there are aspects often on the page that we can add to structured data that are not that would not fall afoul of something like a cloaking. So we were talking about, and this was before product variant schema was launched. We were talking about could you help clean up the generative search results about your products, because there was some hallucinations and some inaccuracies about the products they offered, and particularly the sizes and materials that those products were offered in. And I said, well, look, we can use some of these advanced product markup attributes. We could clarify color, size specification, material, pattern, right? If we put that in the structured data, then that may contribute to an increased accuracy and description of your product offerings. But the problem is that they cannot populate that data at scale for their products because the product database itself is poorly constructed, right?
Yes,
So
that's a completely valid argument.
what is it? Okay, that makes me think, right? So if the product database itself does not have a uniform construction, where you define size availability or product materials, etc., what's driving that? That's because we're in this era of business where speed is more important than quality, right? So I think that more websites would be able to take advantage of these advanced markup if the data underlying their website was in better shape, and it's almost uniformly not. So, I wanted to add
That's
that additional operational issue to, your thoughts about, well, what are
that's
the opportunities
basically
that are still on the table?
that's basically what you just described, and I'm also very honored to have this beautiful mind of yours having this conversation with me today. um, Data curation is what we advise our people that I work with, people that I work for, people that I collaborate with on this type of challenges to invest in. Because if you don't have your data quality engineered in the first place, then it can hardly scale with schema or semi-scale in a sense. So we will very likely always need this human in the loop approach, whether we are trying to do some engineering efforts, no matter whether they're like standard engineering efforts like they were in the past, or some new initiative around generative AI and so forth. But we also need to take the bigger picture. I mean, you work for a crawling tool, right? So from a crawling perspective of Google, and also from a server log perspective, as for us as providers of that data to Google, it can be super expensive if we don't engineer for the presentation layer that Google wants to build for the end user. Why? Because we usually say, okay, Google comes to this page, I don't know, drop some metric that is statistically significant on a daily level for a crawler to establish, to enable. And then it comes, for example, 100 times a day. And that means that Google is interested in our page. But is it? Is it Google interested in the page? Yes, it is. But is it interested, or is having difficulty understanding the content on the page? So it's coming multiple times until it reaches the upper threshold to process that data for the end user. So that's also an argument, and that also creates costs not just for them for processing powers, but also to us as providers of that data, because someone needs to take the cost ownership for the server requests that are being sent to the server, basically. So someone needs to take care about that too. So it's a much more holistic picture about the whole engineering setup, just like you said, and that was beautifully put, by the way. Thank you for that. You need to invest in data curation. That's my point of view, investing in holistic tooling that can give you the whole picture and the whole impact about how a schema or schema markup or structured data affects your website overall. And finally, design for accessibility. I mean, accessibility not just for people with impairments, but also general accessibility for people from different regions, so on and so forth.
Love that. All right, so as I'm going to bring us to a close soon, and this has been fascinating, so I absolutely love it. And thank you so much both for gracing us with all of this knowledge. And I think it's just a really good discourse, and agree with y'all. A lot of it is about what is the quality of the data. What do you have to work with? What are you presenting? Because at the end of the day, that kind of permeates through everything, right? As far as what's available. So I would love to hear, are there any last thoughts or tips you want to give? And I'm actually going to pull out something you said as like something for our listeners to take with them. You had mentioned how looking at some of the AI results, and if you're seeing things that are not factual about your brand, that is a great indicator of areas to clean up, areas to really take a deep look at. I think that's a super actionable item that I absolutely love, and I have not heard anywhere else. So really enjoyed you sharing that. So I'm just going to steal your thunder and make that mine. So I would love, and we'll start with Anne again, anything else you want to close with as far as like tips or considerations, approaches as people are thinking about their schema strategy, or even to include one?
I think that what I've come to throughout this conversation, Emmy, is that we're actually on the same side of this argument rather than on opposite sides, which is exciting. We both want to see structured data used to advantage, and we see the operational and data hygiene issues that are the barriers to it. And we both fervently want a better quality web that is less energy intensive and serves the need of information seekers globally. I think
Exactly.
the last thing that I wanted to punctuate this conversation with is how to equip the SEOs in our audience to have these conversations within their organizations. And the rubric I've come up with is, to go back to what are the problems that we're trying to solve. When you're considering your strategic plan for the next quarter or your goals for the SEO team for the next year, and you see an opportunity to implement or to expand a schema implementation, what are the problems that you're trying to solve with that? Is it a Band-Aid to overcome operational inefficiencies or disconnects between teams? Is it a solution to cover over poor site taxonomy and machine readability?
Yes.
Is it
Great question.
the lack of strategic and intentional internal linking or a kitchen sink approach to your mega menu? I would urge SEOs to dig in, and rather than checking a box off that says we did this year, to try and get into the larger conversations about what the longer term growth plays can be for a website, given the way that information indexation and presentation is evolving.
Great questions, great indicators, great framework for going forward. And I will just add to that and actually contribute to expanding it in a similar way. We use schema nowadays to start the hard conversations with the companies, actually. Just like you said, we need to have a rubric to enable this conversation going, because I mentioned data quality, data curation before, right? And that's the foundational layer for everything that you want to do. Whatever you want to do better internal linking, whenever you want to do better content understanding through schema implementation, whenever you want to do better content improvement or engineer the content in a certain way, whatever. This enables us to open the hard conversations about this data quality that actually is some sort of a reason to enable more productive, to enable finding new productive insights for the company, rather than having a detrimental or bad effect. That's so far my experience. I've been advising with small and medium-sized businesses, with agencies, also mixed product and agency experience, now within a corporate setup. And I think that so far that approach was very successful for us, because especially in the new generative AI era, when you want to build even more complex experiences and user journeys on top of the existing data, like agentic SEO, agentic apps, and so on, it's even much more fundamental to have structured data in place. Doesn't have to be schema markup for SEO, but structured data, some sort of schema in place in the business, so that you can start developing and enabling everything from there.
Awesome. And love the call out to agentic SEO. I think that's something we're going to see more on the rise, and should be interesting to continue watching. Ladies, thank you again so much for joining us today. And of course, I'm sure the conversation may still continue in Women in Tech SEO. Emmy, I know you also published a fantastic piece, really just kind of covering your thoughts on this and some of the discussion that has been had. So excited to see as that continues to be expanded as well. And Anne, I would agree. I think honestly, we're probably all actually pretty close to on the same page that we think there is power when it is done correctly. But that does take a lot of time. It takes a lot of forethought, planning. And to y'all's point, also generally means you need to have cleaner data, more fulfilled data. So there are some foundational things that sometimes have to happen before you can really start to reap all the rewards. So again, thank you so much for joining. This has been another episode of Opinionated SEO Opinions. If you have any questions, feel free to submit those to thegray.company/ask-SEO, and catch us on Twitter or LinkedIn or X, whatever we call it these days. I'm still going to call it Twitter because I'm old. And check us out. We will catch you next time.